as young women to really maximize your human asset, right? Like I think one thing that we often forget is that the ability to accumulate financial assets starts with you, first of all, maximizing you as a human asset, right? You being able to take yourself to the marketplace and say, this is what I'm worth.
Before we get into this episode, I know you've been struggling with the idea of starting your own business and launching a premium product that you know is going to transform lives. So I have a bomb resource for you. The man himself, Words Taylor, is going to help you launch your product or service for the clients who need your help right now. Now, you can't call yourself a business owner unless you are getting in front of new clients every single day, and Words knows exactly how to do that. All you have to do is tap in so he can teach you his 6-figure launch strategy that's produced over $5 million in client sales. So all you have to do is go to highticketlaunchsecrets.com. That's highticketlaunchsecrets.com and get into the free training. It's happening this week. So go to highticketlaunchsecrets.com and let's get into the episode. Welcome to another episode of the Work and Play Podcast. I'm your host, Ariel Young, and today we have a really cool guest today. So if you haven't thought about your finances and thought about like how do you actually make a transition, in any transition, being financially sound, this is a woman that we need to speak to, right? So without further ado, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. So hello everyone, I am Leida Speller, a certified financial planner, currently with the Apogee Financial Partners based here in Atlanta. And I run a financial planning practice that focuses primarily on addressing the racial wealth gap, but I would say more specifically, addressing the gender retirement gap. And even more specific than that, the gender racial retirement gap. Because too many minorities, and specifically Black women, enter into their retirement years ill-prepared to maintain their desired standard of living. And so that's kind of what I do and what I am about. If we drill all the way down into my work, it really is that specific.
That's impactful. And I'm thinking like just about over the years of how you've come to learn that specific population is even needed, because it's not something that we talk about. You know, my mom she went into retirement right before Corona. So for me to even think about what her financial portfolio even looks like, it's like daunting because I don't even think we've ever had this conversation. Also, not to mention, I don't know if any of me or my friends have ever had the conversation in our 20s. I'm in my 30s now, right? So I think this is a very timely conversation to have. And I'm sure over the years you found like this population, you know, through your experience. But what's the main driver of why you focus on this population, this specific issue now?
Yeah, great points and excellent question. So the reason why I focus so intentionally and so specifically on this population now is because I'm more mature myself, right? And being in this industry, I get to sit down with a lot of women who are ill-prepared for that journey ahead, but who are very well aware of some of the mistakes that they've made in the past. And they are regretful of some of those mistakes, and they wish that they could go back and undo them and maybe make different choices. And so I am so passionate about having this conversation with women, and particularly Black women, because regardless of where they are, I feel like there's always something you can do to make yourself better off than you would be if you do nothing. And it's also an opportunity to speak with younger women, to, you know, really reinforce for them, or first kind of bring into their awareness and then constantly reinforce the fact that that time is coming for you. And I don't want you to be regretful, because you have an incredible opportunity now to work at balancing your life today to make sure that it is as incredible as you can make it, while also caring about the woman that you are becoming. right? And at some point she will be 60 and 70 and 80 and 90, prayerfully. And her life matters too. And so we want to make sure that young women are thinking about, yes, enjoying their lives and really living it to the fullest today. Also balancing that with who they are becoming and preparing financially for her. And if you start young enough, it doesn't take a whole lot, right? And so just making sure we're having that conversation with our younger women, and also making sure our women who are more mature don't feel like all is lost. And while we can't go back and get you 20 or 30 or even 40 again, we can do our best with what you have today. And so let's just commit to that.
That's so powerful. And I can imagine, like, so in a dollar sense, when a woman meets you, right? Let's say she's in maybe like a financial distress, right? And she works with you. What is like, no matter how old you are, I feel like the compound interest and things like that, they work for you no matter at what point you start. But what are some of the financial gains that a person who is not aware that they need a financial planner becomes like, able to accumulate when they finally get a financial planner?
Yeah, I think one of the a very simple and powerful exercise that I like to show people is that if you took something as small as $100 a month and you put it into a Roth IRA, and let's say we are talking to a 40-year-old woman who says, you know what, I don't have a lot to put away right now. And I will probably have to work longer than, the traditional 65, year retirement age. And so let's say this 40-year-old woman has decided or understands that based on her resources today, she's able to put away a small amount, and she has also decided that she'll likely have to work a little longer. So let's say the 40-year-old decides to work until she's 70. And let's also say that she decides to use a Roth IRA, just as an example, for a retirement or as a retirement vehicle, not having maybe an employer-sponsored plan like a 401k or something like that. And so she really is solely reliant upon what her resources can do. And so she opens a Roth IRA and she's able to put away $100 a month. If she takes out $100 a month and invests it, let's say in an S&P 500 index fund, and she does that consistently, never missing a month, putting her $100 away, not a penny more, not a penny less. And if we assume that the market performed the same way it's performed over the last 30 years, again, for illustrative purposes only, we have no crystal ball, we don't know that it will. But let's say that $100 a month, she's committed, she's consistent, and she's efficient with her dollars, making sure that she doesn't go a penny less than that. She would take that $100 a month, and it would be over $190,000 when she goes to retire. Granted, she's not a millionaire, but it's more than what it would have been if she had done nothing. And I think that really is the point. Arthur Ashe, the late great tennis player Arthur Ashe, has this quote that I absolutely love and that I always like, which is start where you are, with what you have, and do the best that you can. And I just encourage women that no matter where they are, just embrace that quote, that I am going to just start where I am with what I have and do the best I can.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think that's the first step. I was just talking to a woman who is a community organizer. And, when it comes to, I might be taking us down a trip, but I promise I'm coming back. But when it comes to certain things that the Black community has faced, like redlining and being taxed out of their homes and displaced in different ways, I think about what 170K, either way, would do for a person who's on a fixed income, right? 60, 70, 80, and you just have $100 and something dollars just kind of to the side, even. That way, when you're on a fixed income, things like tax gouging and things like that can save you. Like, it can save you from being displaced, right? And I think that's the way we should think about it. It's not, oh, I might as well not do it because I'm not going to be a millionaire, so why even start? It's to think about those real situations that just, a 3 to 4% increase on your taxes when you're 70 or 80 years old and you're no longer working, $100,000 can save your life.
That's absolutely right. That is so important that we really approach this thinking about it in very practical terms. It is not about, getting rich, right? It's not about necessarily getting rich. It is about building wealth, which means that you are building property, right? You're accumulating property of value that you can convert to cash that enables you to buy things that you need to buy. That is what wealth is. And I think so often we correlate it with being rich, right? When it is accumulating assets of value, property of value that you can take and you can convert to cash and use that cash to purchase the things or cover the expenses that you need to purchase and cover in your life.
Yes. I like that example. I think that's really practical. And then so it makes it even easier for us to speak to a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old who's well into their years of being able to accumulate wealth and put more than that $100 in there, right? And so just imagine like the impact that you're making. I think what you're doing is really awesome. And because you've chosen to do it for the Black woman, it just sits with my heart. So I think about the days when I was in college and I, through a roundabout way, found corporate finance because one, I wasn't going to be a CPA. Two, in my mind, when I learned about financial planning, I thought the only way that I could really make a living was to work for wealthy white men who I had nothing in common with, and I was gonna have to spend my Saturdays golfing. Now, that was my horror story in my mind, and maybe that's what you've experienced a little bit, but could you walk us through, like, how did you find financial planning?
Yeah, so, and my journey has been some of that, right? But it's certainly been some of that. But my journey, I kind of landed in this role or kind of on this journey very accidentally even. And, it wasn't intentional at all. I was like a lot of 22-year-olds in that I really just needed a job, right? I needed to be gainfully employed. And a mutual fund company, this will date me for sure, but a mutual fund company had an ad in the paper, like way back when, looking for, they were opening a new office in my city.
Okay.
And so they were hiring this inaugural group to open this new office. And I applied, not even knowing what a mutual fund was. But I was very curious, and I've always been ready intellectually for a challenge, right? And so I was like, I don't know what this is, but it has something to do with wealth and investing, and I'm just really interested. And so I applied, and of this group, and I forget, maybe it was like a group of 15 or 20 of us, there were 4 of us that they tapped for their trading desk. Nice. And I was one of the 4 that they tapped for the trading desk. And the rest is kind of history, and it was a large, highly rated mutual fund company, like of the top tier in the country, if not the world. And so they invested a lot in training and development and so I was fortunate enough to start on this journey in this company where they really invested a lot on your, into your professional development as an employee. And so, have the company really invested in developing me. I was, again, very young, very green in this space. And so I was learning a lot through them. And then in addition to that, as a trader, I had the opportunity to build so many relationships around the country with broker dealers. And so this started in Virginia, where I'm from. And when I decided to relocate to Atlanta, it was really as simple as me picking up the phone and reaching out to one of my relationships, actually a few of my relationships, and saying, I'm seriously considering relocating to Atlanta. Do you have a job for me? That's kind of, and so that, relocated to Atlanta, and I worked on trading desks for firms here in Atlanta. I did that for a few years. And trading is very, trading in the kind of markets investment space is, it's very ancillary to providing advisory services. And so I was working a lot with, registered representatives, like advisors who were working directly with their clients.
Okay.
So I was trading on behalf of the firm and on behalf of their client accounts. So I went through multiple roles and responsibilities in the industry before I landed out front as an advisor on my own in my practice. But it's definitely been a journey, and I've occupied many roles in this space, and then kind of getting out front leading my own practice 6 years ago.
The level of experience that you've had in different roles kind of makes it perfect for you to finally go out into the front, because you've managed people's money in all these different scenarios. So now you know how to advise other people.
Yeah, it's I've been very fortunate in that way. I came up in the industry at a time where a lot of the technology that's in the hands of advisors today was not, right? There was a point where, that they didn't have that technology. Those resources weren't out there for clients and advisors. And so they depended on, a lot of middle office and back office personnel to do a lot for them. And the benefit for me and those of us who kind of came up in that professional generation was that we were so hands-on with so much, and we really learned the nuts and bolts of the industry, both kind of from a back office, behind the scenes perspective. And then getting out front, I have the opportunity to learn infinitely more as an advisor, and it has certainly been a lot of learning, and it continues to be. Because it's a very broad and deep responsibility and profession.
Absolutely, So when I think about your life now, you kind of live a lot of people's dreams, like people who really truly want this freedom and responsibility and knowledge, financial knowledge, in a space where a lot of people in our community don't have that financial literacy. You know what I mean? To leverage certain things and to make your own way somehow, like to use your money to develop something instead of just working your entire life. But then I'm also thinking about you at 22, right? When you went into the world of trading, and sometimes I wish I lived, in the time where people were willing to train you, because my story, millennials will always say, job descriptions are must have 5 years of experience, and you're like, well, where am I in 5 years of experience? But when I think about you at 22, what was your, if you hadn't found trading, what was your dream at that time?
Wow, so I can't really say that I was clear about a dream at that time in my life. I really was searching. I was searching, and I was very fortunate to enter into this career and have this opportunity with no experience, right? And to really enter through a gateway into an organization that was very willing to invest in you in that way. And part of it, I believe, was the fact that they were opening this new office in this town where there were no other offices like it, right? And so I think they probably had, and it was, and during, I'm talking like it was 50 years ago, but I promise you it wasn't. But it was at a time where I feel like, look, in retrospect, that they had to come into the market willing to make that investment, at least with the first few cohorts of employees. And so I was very fortunate to have that opportunity, and then quite frankly, for, I would say, at least the first decade or more of my career, I was just really fortunate to work under managers who saw that I worked really hard, that I was very determined to learn, that I was committed, I was focused, and they wanted to support that. And whenever they had new opportunities or moved to a new farm or onto a new opportunity, there was typically something where they landed that they identified for me and wanted to bring me along.
Yes.
So I was really fortunate kind of that first leg of my career to have those relationships and those opportunities, and I leveraged every single one of them. And quite frankly, I build my practice and my career in the same way, right? I'm always willing to develop young talent, and to help nurture other opportunities and to make connections and to make sure that there's better representation in this space, both from a gender perspective and this perspective, a racial perspective. So that's very important to me because it was done for me in such a generous way, that I'm committed to that same level of commitment to developing talent.
Absolutely, I love it. When I think about my vision of wealth management and financial planning, and it's funny that I walked away from an opportunity like that because of something so trivial. But at the same time, when you say that there need to be more people and gender in the space that you're in, I think about the challenges that a lot of our people experience, right? And they don't necessarily figure out how to navigate that. And what I'm thinking is like you've clearly found a way to navigate career-wise, right? And to navigate as a Black woman in a space that can be more male-dominated and then white male-dominated. So what is that one thing you've learned? Because, and also your career is very relationship focused, right? So how did you learn to navigate that early on? Did you stumble a bit and then kind of learn a couple things?
I stumbled a lot. I hurt a lot. It was not without its trauma. It was not without its upsets. And gosh, just thinking about it now makes me really emotional, because I do think back to the people who, like I said, I had these managers who saw the talent, they saw the hard work, they saw the commitment, and they also saw, quite frankly, that more often than not, I was the only little Black girl on the trading desk, or that I was far younger than a lot of the white males who were in the environment with me and who dominated this space. And so I was subjected to a lot. And, again, it was not without its pain, it was not without its upset, it was not without its trauma. And, I would have to say that in those earlier years, I probably handled it by just stuffing a lot down and just staying very focused on the tasks, right? And I was always committed to learning. Like, I was just cranking out industry licenses. Like, I think I've had every industry license you can imagine, very focused on credentialing, always feeling like I had to do more, have more, be more to just be on par, right? And it was exhausting, it was difficult, it was hard, but I have to say that it has certainly paid off for me. Again, just staying in there and just standing in my own resiliency and my own confidence that whatever they can do, I can do too. And it may not come as easily, for me, but I'm here and I'm going to stay here. And so I think, I just really navigated it and was able to stay the course because, again, I am resilient and I was committed and I knew that I was doing the work and I knew that I was getting licensed and credentialed and I was doing all of the things that I needed to do to be able to technically deliver in this space. And quite frankly, I leaned a lot on those managers who saw greatness in me and who kept their doors open. And I would walk through them and say, this is the day that I had on this desk, like,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in a locker room today and I'm not really here for it, and I would really have those conversations.
Yeah.
And then, eventually I just got to a point where I just stepped into my own power. And I said, look, this is what I know. This is what I am capable of, like, period.
Yeah.
Like, period. And I'm willing to go toe to toe, head to head with anyone else who is here. Like, it really took kind of standing in that, saying I'm here because I deserve to be here, because I'm capable of doing what everyone else is here to do. And I'm willing to be challenged on that. And so it's been a journey. It's still a journey, but it's been interesting and rewarding at the same time, and it certainly brought me to a very interesting place today, and I'm grateful for it.
I can imagine.
I didn't change it.
Listen, gratefulness is the point that you have to be, especially when I hear like you flipped the switch, like, and stepped into your power.
Oh, yeah.
So many of us, especially like friends of mine and distant friends of mine, if they're on social media going through their journey in corporate, and they're learning how to be right in that space. And a lot of us haven't reached that place where we flipped the switch yet. So when I think about like your journey, I know we say flip the switch, but I know there was like a build up. You were like building into your power.
It took some time.
So, but what are some of those things? So in hindsight, right? What are some of those things that you realized practically really allowed you to stay clear and learn the business while managing some of those like emotional traumas or those like external traumas or mental traumas is what I wanted to say.
I'm extremely passionate about helping corporate professionals transition into entrepreneurship. So I had to share the number one thing that helped me develop as an entrepreneur, and that's the morning meetup. I joined the morning meetup specifically for the structure because I'm leaving corporate America, so I'm used to those morning huddles. We got our sales, we know what our goals are, and we get our day started. So I was missing that for 2 years before I even found the morning meetup. Now, the second thing that I really benefited from was the revenue generating activities was not necessarily a thing before 2021. Now, I had my LLC, I had my website, I had a few clients here and there, but the momentum really took off as soon as I got around like-minded individuals and people who really knew the struggles that I was already dealing with, that I could get over my fear of sales and communicating my value and putting myself out there on social media. The friends that I've developed, the mentors and the mentees that I've created relationships with, everything has really created this environment for us to thrive as entrepreneurs. So if you want to develop as an entrepreneur, you're leaving corporate America and you're trying to figure out how do I get my footing in entrepreneurship, then the morning meetup will definitely be a game changer for you. You can learn with us, you can grow with us. And I didn't even mention that we have a book club. Join us in the community. Let's get started today. You will not regret it.
Wow, that's a great question. In retrospect, as I was mentoring, I had a child, I had a spouse, I had a home, and me being strong for the life that was very important to me was critical, and I wasn't going to allow these other forces to rob me of being able to be the mother and the wife and the family member that I needed to be for those things that were important to me. And so being really motivated by just my family and my home and my life, and just reminding myself that those things were important to me and they were worthy of my commitment, and they were going to, they were enough to keep me in the game, like battling it out. And I think that was the main thing that just kept me focused. That, I'm stronger than coming in here every day and allowing, these sexist, racist kind of, environments to break me. And also just focusing on the fact that while those things were absolutely present, so were some other incredible things, right? These great relationships. I had great peers that I worked with, great leaders, and incredible opportunities to really learn and master my craft.
Yeah.
And so those things just kept me like in there.
Amazing.
Sure.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
So you decided, so you've been both in the corporate space and you've been in entrepreneurship. When did you decide to take your first go at entrepreneurship?
Woo. And I still can't believe I did it. So I worked for a nonprofit for a number of years. So I stayed in the traditional wealth management space for quite a few years.
Okay.
And to make a very long story short, I was asked by a national nonprofit to come in and to work in financial capability programs when the bottom fell out of the market, right? Back during the Great Recession, when so many families were going through bankruptcy and foreclosure. And this national nonprofit organization was focused on helping families in our country really survive, like navigate bankruptcy, prevent foreclosure, and then once they had gotten those crises behind them, to rebuild. And that gave me an opportunity to look at financial wellness through a lens of mission-focused work. And so I did that for a number of years. And so I come from this traditional wealth management space,
Yes.
where it's very kind of wealthy client focused, and then I go into this nonprofit space, which is the opposite end of the financial services spectrum. And so I go into this nonprofit space that was really focused on financial crises and getting people through financial crises and then rebuilding. And so now I get to a point in my life where this very interesting intersectionality is happening. So I have my own life experience. I have this traditional wealth management professional experience. And now I have this opposite end of the financial wellness spectrum, your professional experience. And so these three things are coming together to forge this person or this professional who now wants to move forward again. And so again, bringing my life experience, my traditional wealth management, and then my nonprofit mission-focused work around financial wellness all together. And I'm like, okay, I'm going through these changes, and then, my life changed a lot personally. I got divorced, and I had a kid who's now transitioning into more maturity, and now I'm like, okay, I have all this life experience, all this professional experience, and quite frankly, it's time for me to reinvent myself. What's next? And so entrepreneurship was like the last frontier. It's like the final frontier. And I was like, not only am I ready for this new level of freedom, but my God, look at the person I am today and all I would bring to it. Particularly around having this wealth management conversation or this financial wellness conversation. And that's really what brought me to this, just this desire for this new freedom. And also this desire to bring all of this experience and this new perspective around wealth and wealth building and what that means not only for the wealthy, but what about the not so wealthy? Right? What's possible for them too?
Yeah.
It just created the perfect storm for me to step out and say, this is for, yes, my own freedom, but this is also because there's a difference for me to make in the world in a new way.
Absolutely.
And so that's what brought me to entrepreneurship.
Now, the question that we all new entrepreneurs experience is identifying our avatar. Nowadays, we say avatar. It's my coach says ideal client, all of those, right? So with your nonprofit experience, your wealth management experience, and then your personal experience, who was the ideal client or clients that you really wanted to work with in your beginning entrepreneur days?
Yeah. So in my beginning entrepreneur days, I think I was like a lot of entrepreneurs in that I was like, anybody want to be my client? Please talk to me, please. God, talk to me. So that really was kind of day one for me. Like anyone who wants to talk to me, Call me, 1 a.m. The phone's next to my bed. Just call me. We can have a conversation. But it really was kind of being in a financial institution or multiple financial institutions here in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And for a number of years, and very, very honestly, not seeing any clients who looked like us, not seeing any advisors who looked like me, from a gender and racial perspective. Like, I believe I met one in the final financial institution that I worked with. There was one female advisor and not a single Black advisor. And so being out front, being an entrepreneur with that perspective made entrepreneurship in that way feel out of reach for me. And then in the nonprofit space, I was like, oh, it's because we're all right here. Like, this is where we're at. Like, this is where we are. Too many of us are in crisis. Too many of us are struggling to figure out this money thing. Too many of us are constantly going back to, the starting line, back to ground zero. And always rebuilding setback, rebuild setback. And so as I started with, can anyone talk to me, right? And just started talking to so many different people, I started to get clearer. And then it became, and then I started to really immerse myself into the racial wealth divide data and understand that it's ever expanding, right? And so then I got clear around, I absolutely want to be in my community and I want to solve this problem. And it is really as of late that I have gotten very clear about wanting to work with Black women who are kind of mid-career, mid to approaching their later career. And because again, this is that nonprofit crisis kind of passion that comes through, and really have some intervention there. And so I would say it's probably within the last 2 years that I've gotten really clear about the big problem that I want to solve, and how these individual lives look. And so that's kind of how I've gotten pretty specific. But so that's my avatar now. But starting out, it was, can you pick up the phone and call? And if so, then let's talk.
Anybody,
Yeah.
You mentioned so tell me if you resonate with this. I was just talking to someone about the way money works in America or in the world. And we likened it to the game Monopoly. Would you agree?
In what sense do you liken it to Monopoly?
In a sense, so when we're talking, in a systematic way, right? We're talking about you get the money out of the box, we deal it out, the banker has the money, and the person who knows the game more than likely is going to take everybody's money at the table consistently, kind of similar to that saying where it's like with the wealth gap. Even if we took all of the wealth and distributed it evenly among the people who don't have it, eventually it'd be back in those hands. So that's one way, right? In a sense that we also need to learn how property works. I think that's another thing. And you know what? Because I don't know Monopoly.
You nailed it. It's the mindset you bring to the game, right? Like you said, even if you dole it out in one way, right? Mindset ends up working in a way that people will have kind of an abundance, a saving, investing mindset tend to retain, right? Whereas consumers consume, right? And so even if you distribute the wealth in a sense, right, it ends up, kind of heavily weighted in, certain areas of concentration. And so, yes, number one is you're absolutely right. You bring a certain mindset to the game. And then number two, there is no wealth if you don't accumulate, right? You have to own assets, you have to own property. And that is very much the game of Monopoly. I'm going to buy up a whole bunch of stuff, and I am going to charge you to occupy any space on it, right? And so I am going to create assets that then in turn earn me a return. And so you totally nailed it. You bring the mindset, we bring our mindset to the money game. And then the other thing is, yes, we have to make money work for us, we have to hold on to it first and foremost, right? So we have money coming in, obviously we all have expenses, so there's a certain amount of money that goes out, whether those expenses are, fixed or discretionary or what have you. And prayerfully, we all have, some degree of cash surplus left over after that exercise. Well, that cash surplus, that is our wealth, right? We hold on to that money, right? And we invested into assets. That's our wealth. And that wealth it can stay in cash. We can invest it in financial assets like stocks, bonds, mutual funds. You can invest it in real property. Like we hold on to it, and we invested in assets that did then, in turn, provide us a return.
Yes. Okay, so you agree?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
you get a really good explanation. I could not have just described it because I just know in essence, the game. I don't even know how to play the game that well, but then. And I know the world in essence, right? So you just clear that up for me perfectly from a professional perspective.
I don't know Monopoly that well either. That's why I was like, in what sense, right? Because I know that first of all, I know it's a game that can go on for hours.
Yes.
Like, and my family plays it like forever.
Yes.
And so that's why I was curious as to what sense you were talking about. But you totally nailed it. Absolutely. You bring a mindset to it, and then whether or not you are accumulating assets is an important part of how money works.
Yeah. I think about now, I don't want to drill this Monopoly analogy too far, but when you think about it, I've been blessed to be in circles where people actually win the game in one sitting. I think growing up, I don't feel like anyone ever finished that game. It's just like, well, we don't play anymore, right? And what I was going to ask you, I feel like kind of leans in this experience where a lot of people in my community and my background don't really know how to play the game. Because if they do, I think there would be a winner in a much quicker time period. But what you do is kind of like unlock the code, right? There's a lot of us who don't know how to play the game. And we're, no longer talking, actually about Monopoly. I mean like the game of money, the game of life. And I feel like there's a learning curve. I don't particularly know what the learning curve is, but I'm sure you have an idea. So when it comes to our women, specifically, let's go there. Black women who need to understand how to play the game. What's the biggest learning curve that you often have to spend a lot of time on helping us understand so that we can at least, make a nice big hurdle in our financial wealth journey?
That is the $65 million question. No, but that is a great question. And, it's one that I think about a lot and one that I talk about a lot because I do have, a lot of Black female clients. And quite frankly, it is who I am. And so there's so much joy in those relationships, right? Because there's so much relatability there.
Yeah.
But and I really want to be thoughtful about what I say here because I am very careful, especially in my conversations directly with clients, to not at all be critical, to not at all be self-righteous. And one of the first things I always say is that I'm on this journey with you, right? Like none of us is perfect. And even with all of the knowledge that I have, I have made mistakes also. There have been summers when I have taken way more trips than my cash said I could take, right? And I'm tripping on a credit card, right? And I'm like, oh, can I get another Bob Marley with 2 shots in it? Right? Like, so we've all been there. And so I'm very careful to not be critical, to not be judgmental, because I'm on this journey called life also. Having said that, I think there are a few areas where we can do better. And I think one area is, as young women, to really maximize your human asset, right? Like I think one thing that we often forget is that the ability to accumulate financial assets starts with you, first of all, maximizing you as a human asset, right? You being able to take yourself to the marketplace and say, this is what I'm worth. Right, and this is what I'm worth because this is what I've developed in myself professionally. This is what I've developed in myself academically. This is what I've developed in myself experientially. Like, this is what I'm worth. Number two, demand what you're worth. Like, this is what I bring to it. Hey, you're going to pay me, right? And if you're not going to pay me, that's fine. I'll keep finding the I'll keep looking for the opportunity that does. And so, I would say first and foremost, maximize yourself as a human asset, because what you do is you take your human asset and over time you use your human value or your human asset to earn an income or generate revenue through entrepreneurship, and you take a portion of that revenue that you generate and you accumulate financial assets. And so there's a direct correlation between maximizing yourself as a human asset and your human value and your ability to generate revenue to store up those financial assets. So that's the second thing. That's the second thing. And the third thing I think that we can do to be better at that process is to know that more often than not, you need advice. Like, I promise Google doesn't tell you everything, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we struggle in that. You know, I think a lot of us come from families and communities. I know that I'm one of them, where there's so many strong women around me. We have to be very resourceful on our own. We have to figure things out on our own. And oftentimes in our figuring out on our own and for ourselves, we're also doing that for a lot of people around us, right? And so I think we get really locked into and entrenched in our own ability to survive and to understand and to get things done, that maybe we don't allow someone else to hold space for areas where we don't have expertise. You know? And so I think we need to get better about being willing to do that. And also recognize that we're worth investing in that, right? Like we're so worth sitting down with someone who says, I can really help you figure this thing out, but it's going to cost you, right? And be willing to make that investment. And so I would say, lastly, in addition to those things, embracing and just getting comfortable with the fact that it's going to take sacrifice. All of us have finite dollars and we all have competing priorities, right? We wish that we had, infinite resources and to do all the things that we absolutely want to do, but we have to prioritize and we have to say yes to some things. That means that we have to say no to others. And it's just a part of being alive, and it's a part of being a responsible adult. It's just real, and we just have to be willing to accept that.
I'm sitting in my chair just like, that is so good. As I literally asked you the question because I am so like, where does it lie? And I think your response is golden, like in terms of, this is a money problem, but investing in ourselves gets us into the mindset and the habit of investing and then seeing the return in ourselves. Are you familiar with the wealth triangle? I couldn't tell you the man. There's an Asian man. It's a video on YouTube, and he's talking about the wealth triangle and how a lot of people who are in corporate, they get it wrong because they go from corporate and then they try to invest in real estate all of a sudden. But what they miss is the step where you have to invest in yourself. Because we skip that step. And hearing your explanation, it's like once you get used to like the return on investment in yourself, not in the sense that you just go to college and you spend the money and that's why you're upset that you have a job that has nothing to do with your degree. It's in the sense that you you invest even the smallest amount into your well-being, and then seeing the return on you thinking differently and being a better human, right? That in itself will make it much easier for me to sit across from a financial planner and not feel like I'm being swindled because someone wants to help me build my money. Because if I already know the value of investment, i.e. in myself, then I understand what you can do for me financially.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think, that wealth triangle is a very powerful visual because, and I think it's very pervasive in our community in that we always want to jump to the sexy stuff, right? It's like, oh, can you help me buy Bitcoin? I'm like, okay, but what happens if your car breaks down next week? Like, do you have an emergency reserve, right? So we want to jump to the sexy stuff, but it really, if it's going to be solid, it really is a triangle that starts with laying a solid foundation, and then you build on top of that solid foundation. But he's right in his point that too many of us turn the triangle upside down, right? And so we're trying to stand our structure on a point that's inverted, right? And that's not stable. Yeah, and it's just, it's something that people need to be aware of.
Absolutely. That is so good. I'm curious. I know you said you took the long story really short, but I really am curious about how you got into the nonprofit space. So were you on a board and someone tapped your shoulder? How did that happen?
It was so interesting. So I would say this, going back to one of the points that you just made about how we come to these relationships with financial advisors and sitting across from people just feeling like uncertain, and going back to the bringing your full human value to the marketplace. I'm going to answer this, and then I'm going to answer your question. Just make this point, then we'll go back to your question very quickly. But because it kind of segues into that, or it's connected to that. But I think it's so important to be very present, like in and with your pain, because there's so many lessons in it, right? And always look for what it is that you are to learn in it, because so often our pain is directing us into a certain direction, right? And I think when we experience life in that way, when we're present in our pain and we're looking for the lesson and we are in it to learn from it, then it helps to move us forward. And I think if we're kind of moving through life in that way, when we're sitting across from potential advisors or people who may be able to help us in these areas in life where it does require a lot of trust to enter into these professional relationships, we're honing this discernment, right? Because we're learning these lessons, and we're just getting wiser, and we're just getting more adept at discerning what is and what isn't for us. So having made that point, the transition into retirement was kind of a product of that. I told you about how that first decade plus, I was in this space, and it wasn't always easy, right? There was a lot of pain, a lot of trauma. And fortunately, like we all do, we get through it, right? And we figure out the lessons, whether it's in in the present or in retrospect, we learn from them. But I was really at a time in this space where I was miserable. I just did not enjoy my work. But I didn't see what was next. But I was so afraid to make a change because I was making so much money, right? Like you can be imprisoned by the golden handcuffs, right? But I was making very good money as a relatively young woman, kind of transitioning into my maturity, but relatively speaking, I was still a young woman making some really good money, and I had a family. So I wasn't ready to make a change, but I was miserable. I was volunteering at the Atlanta Children's Shelter at the time, and I was working closely with the executive director at the time and the director of development at the time, but I was always spending time with the little kids at the shelter. And one of the beautiful things about that shelter was, and all of the shelters, around the city and across, the country that do the work that they do, that we could never discount, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so much of it goes unnoticed. But one of the beautiful things about the Atlanta Children's Shelter was that there did not feel like they were going to a day shelter. They were in school.
Mm.
And I had gone to like the pre-K class one day, and I was just like, I have my little favorites in there. And I would go hang out with the kids one day. And I was in the pre-K one day, and I remember the first thought that was just really prevalent in my mind was the fact that it was a very hot day. And I was just so grateful that these children had somewhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't out wandering, or wherever their mothers would have them on a day this hot with nowhere to go.
Right.
So I was very grateful that they were able to be in this environment where they were learning and they were thriving, and they were just they were having a good time. So it was just a brutally hot day in Atlanta. The next thing was one of the little girls, who was one of my favorites in this class, she walked up to me and she was admiring my dress. And I said, you know what? You can have it. I said, this is your dress. I'm going to bring it to you. And she said, okay, well, can you bring it to my house after school? And so there was this thought that she feels like she's in school. So it wasn't just me being grateful that they had this experience,
Mm-hmm.
but it was also them recognizing that this was the experience. This was school. This was not a shelter,
Mm-hmm.
And I left the shelter that day falling.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, I just want this like mission focused, heart tugging, like community focused work.
Yeah.
But connecting what I was doing at the time and the money that I was making at the time with that professional experience was not it was not a decision that I was going to make.
Mm-hmm.
Through my work at the shelter, I met someone who was also volunteering at the shelter, who was a leader at a national nonprofit.
Okay.
And said, our agency is exploding. The country is just going through this huge explosion of foreclosures and bankruptcies, and we have these programs, and we need to add to our leadership. Would you be willing to talk to us? And that's kind of how I made the transition.
It was a better leap.
Yes.
I'm sure it was
a huge pay cut.
I'm sure it was, but it wasn't as huge
Exactly.
as it would have been. And you get to fulfill your purpose doing the same thing that you have been doing, but just
Exactly.
for good.
Exactly.
Ah.
Because the 2 points for me in my mind were going from this book management role to the children's shelter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, that's not gonna happen. I can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I just can't afford it. And I had this person approach me and say, hey, we have this. And it was still really hard, right? Because I knew that professionally it meant that I would have to drop all of my licenses, and I would totally lose that part of my professional identity. But I was willing to, I was willing to accept that. I think that was even a process, but I got there much more quickly than I got to accepting that it was just going to be a significant cut in pay.
Got it. Was this before or after your divorce and your daughter grew up? What part of this phase was that?
Before.
This was
Like,
before.
I was full on in family commitment.
Oh my God.
Very
So was it like, listen, honey, this is what I want to do? Or was it like, hey, how was that conversation with your family and how did they take it?
Yeah, it went much better than I expected. It really was, we'll figure it out. Like, you can't, if you're miserable, if this isn't what because when you think of the wealth management space, it's very broad. Like, there are a gazillion different ways in which you can participate in the profession. And at the time, I was participating in the profession in a way that was not for me. It was not the right role. And it wasn't the right role, but it paid me a lot of money. Right? And coming from, like, you know, my backgrounds where we were always caught up in survival, and like I was still very much in that. My family needs to survive. My family was making really good money, right? But I wasn't, that's not how I was processing it. You know, it was, I need to keep every dollar I make, right? Like, that's kind of the mindset. And so, yeah, it was, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. And it was such a blessing because it gave me the opportunity to reinvent myself professionally. Right? Yeah, and so it was, gosh, to date, you know, outside of having the experience of, you know, that I cherish so much of, you know, being a mother and having those experiences that I've had and that I really enjoy around family. It has been the single biggest blessing in my life to be able to go from this traditional wealth management space into this mission-focused work that gave me an opportunity to reinvent myself professionally, that merged the two in a way that really aligns with who I am and how I feel purposed in this life. So I'm grateful.
The top 3 responses that I get when I ask, why do you want to leave corporate America, are that you want financial freedom, you want to own your own time, and you want to build a legacy for this generation and generations to come. Now, this is not a solo job. In order to transition from your 9-to-5 into entrepreneurship, it's going to take community and it's going to take resources. And I've created the community of pioneers who are going to wrap around you and help you make that transition successfully. So if you're interested in leaving your job, go ahead and click that information below. Let's get into the community and let's transition from your 9-to-5 into entrepreneurship successfully. Now let's get back to the episode.
I would say that is the theme of today's conversation. At every step, you know, and I would say, like I talk about this all the time, but expressing gratefulness. You've expressed gratefulness at every single turn. I think that is what blesses us tenfold. It's like putting that out there, and then knowing that even if it was a crappy memory, so to speak, right? Still being grateful for even that, right? Because that allows you to even resonate with your clients on a different level and know exactly where their stress is. So hey, let's figure this thing out so we can focus on the primary goal. That's amazing. So, you know, as you move forward, you're in entrepreneurship now. I know I love volunteering, but I don't volunteer as much as I used to when I was in corporate. But how much time, or do you feel like now you're in a sweet spot of like working and then still being able to impact others? Or are you looking for in this journey, are you looking for a new sweet spot? Are you trying to figure out how to switch the components of your life differently?
So, you know, entrepreneurship definitely does afford you, you know, a lot of freedom in terms of how to configure your day and how to devote your time. Although obviously the necessity to pay your bills and to eat requires that you put a lot into your entrepreneurial journey. I am 100% clear on who I am as a person, and how do I put this without sounding like so cliche? But I know who I am, and I really do know that I am purposed in having an impact, no matter how small, on economic equity. So that is the work that I do. If you pay me nothing, I do that work. And so I do a lot in my practice, but I'm fortunate enough to have some amazing relationships and with organizations and with individuals that really give me an opportunity to just do the work all the time and in so many ways. And so to answer your question, I probably volunteer as much as I work in my business. And so I do quite a bit of board work. And I'm really kind of knee deep in an entrepreneurship program at the Urban League. And also with this other organization, Economic Equity, Emerging Economic Equity Empire, which is specifically focused on the boys and men of color, and positioning them with more economic strength and viability. And so I do a lot of volunteering around that area of need, because it's just who I am and what I'm about. And so I do it. I just do the work.
I love it.
I do the work.
Okay, so as I think about your life and the things that have gotten you where you are today, I feel like it would be like relationships, your exposure to life outside of like a financially stable bubble, right? And then also just, being a mom, being a wife. That's how I'm seeing your life culminate to a place where you can say, like, I volunteer just as much as I work. And so when you say relationships, everything's now is so digital, right? And for someone who's my age or younger, and they want to get to a place where they can say, like, I volunteer as much as I work, and then even to enjoy the entrepreneurial journey, because sometimes we falsely glamorize it, and sometimes we are struggling way harder than it needs to be. So what would you say in this world, and like in this world like 2021, someone who's a millennial and they want to reach this level of balance of like work and impact, work and play? How would you say, what advice would you share to a woman who wants to get involved and also make it an entrepreneurship where they can have that balance too? I'm thinking like kind of with everything you've lived experience of how you found Urban League and how you found even the nonprofit. But I'm always thinking like there's a way to streamline that, and there's something that she can capitalize on right now that she's just not thinking about. So when you think about that opportunity, what would you say?
Wow, so if I just think about my own journey, I think a few things stand out. And I would say, first and foremost, just like find the thing that just gets to you, right? Like, what is the thing that just makes you angry or pisses you off, or that you want to change? And I mean, like, looking at it outside of just yourself, right? Like looking for a cause, like whether it's in your community, whether it's in your city, whether it's in your state, whether it's in your country, whether it's in the world, right? Like, what is happening today that you just don't like, right? And view that as a problem, that no matter how small your impact or your contribution, that you have some power, some ability in contributing to the solution, and find a way to contribute. Find a way to, find the people who are doing the work and connect and say, look, I want to fix this too. And I have an hour a week. I'd love to give it to you. I'd love to give it to your work. And just use that as an entry point into a community or into a system where there are very important relationships there waiting for you. Like, I would look at it as that way. As far as balance, I don't know that I've achieved that. But one thing I have achieved is say no. Say no. And saying that I matter, right? My wellness matters. Making sure that I'm not walking through every day, all day, giving to everyone else before I give to myself, right? Like, I matter. And because I matter, sometimes I have to tell you no. Kid, husband, job, business, like sometimes you just have to say no. And I've just gotten to a point where I literally block my mornings. Like, I don't do anything work related before 10 o'clock. In the morning, I'm running, I'm doing yoga, I'm praying, I'm meditating, I'm journaling, or maybe I'm sleeping, right? Which is like no entrepreneur ever says that, right? Like, maybe I'm sleeping in, and maybe that means that I work later into the evening, and so be it. But what I have been able to do is to say my day may get crazy. Most of my days do. And I go into most days having to give to a lot of things. My business, my clients, and I have to give. But before I start that giving, I'm going to give to myself first. And I'm going to give to myself with the understanding that without a healthy foundation, without a healthy being, I won't survive this, right? Like, I just won't survive this. And, I will live through it, right? But I won't survive it in the way that I want to survive it. Meaning, I want to thrive until my last day on this earth. I want to live well and I want to thrive. And that requires well-being, right? It requires well-being, or being well in our physical being, in our emotional being, in our mental being, in our financial being. And we have to be intentional about that. And giving myself 3 or 4 hours in the morning before I start giving myself to everything else is an important part of that. And so I don't know that I have achieved balance. I don't believe that I have, but I have achieved being able to own my own wellness and not allowing life to rob me of giving myself that.
I love it.
I think that allows me to deal with the craziness, the imbalance.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. And like even your advice about finding that issue or that thing that irritates us is spot on. It's priceless advice, because a person like me may look at a person like you and say, oh, I want to get into every single organization you're currently involved in. But what irritates you might not irritate me, right? And we get so caught up in what our idols and our mentors and our coaches are doing that we don't take enough time to listen to what really is, what our heart and soul is saying, and letting that lead us to those.
Hey guys, it's Ariel from the Work and Play podcast. If you're getting any value from this channel, and I mean anything from the tutorials to the podcast to the random videos that you see on this channel, then I just ask that you do one thing. Please subscribe. Subscribe and share this to anyone that you think this resonates with, and drop a comment below so I know what other things that you want to see next. Now let's get back to the episode.
You said relationships. Oh, you said those. These are powerful relationships that are waiting for you. I was like, okay.
Oh, they so are. They're. I mean, that is one thing I will say with absolute certainty. There is a tribe waiting for you, right? But you need to identify what is tugging at you, what is it that your spirit so wants to fix, right? Where is it that your heart, that your soul wants to contribute? And there's so many people already working on the same problem and waiting for you to show up. Because when you show up, there are a whole bunch of people that they want to introduce you to, because we want our army to be as big as possible when we're addressing these huge social issues. And like I said, economic equity is that's my jam. Yeah. I play that record all day long, or what do you call it today? MP3? I don't know. I don't know what you call it today. But that's my jam, and I play it all day long, right? I'm always having that conversation, and I'm so fortunate because I plug into these communities where people feel the same exact way, and guess what? It has been so incredibly impactful to my entrepreneurial journey. These relationships, whether it has been come here to this organization and lead this program and create another revenue stream while you're building your business, right? Around something I'm already passionate about anyway. So I have this entrepreneurial journey, and I'm really focused on this thing in terms of wealth accumulation and wealth building. And because I'm in this ecosystem addressing these problems, it's, oh yeah, come do this, right? Like, can you do this as part of your business? Does this fit with your business? Oh yeah, it fits. Here's another revenue stream, right? So just show up, just find what it is that tugs at you, that, that likely has, some degree of your passion prevalent, and it may evolve from there, right? But find what eats you up. Like, my time at the children's shelter was so revealing for me. And just the example that I shared with you, leaving that day just bawling, because I could not stand the thought of so many Black children being homeless in this city. That just, so we got to do better. We have got to do better. Like, this is not okay. We should not live in a city like this with so many homeless women and children. And one of the things that I did as a result of that experience was I joined the United Way Speakers Bureau. And so I would go around to, they raise money and corporate and all that. And I would, I did their campaign one year for representing the children's shelter to raise awareness of the plight of homeless women and children in the city. Because we see the men standing on the corner and asking for money, like their plight is pretty visible. No less painful and daunting, of course. But what we don't see often enough is the fact that there are so many homeless women and children, and we don't see them because, a lot of people don't want to see or know that women and children are homeless. And so maybe we give them a place on our couch, or we allow them to make a pallet on our floor, or, shelters do take them in. And it was just the thing that just made me so angry that this was happening so often. And I was like, let me go figure out what I can do. And as I dug more into that issue that just made me so angry, what I realized was we need to make our people more economically viable in our communities and in their families. And it's just really morphed. And it's really, kind of gotten really big in my life over the years. And so it's my jam.
It's your jam. It's record.
Yes,
MP3 player, CD, cassette tape. I don't care what it is. We are running it, and it is amazing songs. We love it. I have really thoroughly enjoyed you visiting me today.
This is fun.
Yes. Oh my gosh, you have given us so much advice. Your story is impactful. You've given us really good detail, and I know I thought I was gonna have to reach for the tissue at one point, but you held it in. Not even just you just. I love it. So thank you so much for joining, and guys, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And Leida, if there's someone who is listening to your story and or watching us, and they're interested in staying connected with you, or working with you, or having you join their team as a financial planner, how can they get in contact with you, and how can they stay connected?
Yeah, so I'm still talking about records, so as you can imagine, I'm not that visible on social media, so that is probably not the easiest way to get me. But the easiest way to get me is to really shoot me an email, and that's lspeller@applegfp.com, and that's L and then speller, just as it sounds, and then Apogee, or L speller, just as it sounds, and then at Apogee, is APOGEE, F like financial, P like planner.com.
Got it. The information will definitely be in the description, so don't worry. It will be available for you to contact her. And I thank you again.
This was so much fun.
I really enjoyed myself.
Me too.
Well, until next time, guys, you know what to do. Tune in next week, and I so enjoy you guys. I enjoyed it too. But until next time, peace out.
Bye, everybody.